Democratic gubernatorial debate is underway here on KSL News Radio. You can stream this. You can watch the stream at kslnewsradio.com. And in light of the limited amount of time we have left, I'm going to go right to the question. This goes first to Mr. Cook. Poverty and homelessness in our state is a huge issue, especially for our local communities. But what role should the state play in helping with poverty and homelessness?
The poverty and homelessness issue in the state is tied in very closely to education and to the justice system. Because we graduate such a low percentage of our minority students from high school, we create a pipeline that moves from the high school to the prisons. And because we don't fund these programs adequately, we create a cycle of poverty and a cycle of homelessness that we put people into that's almost impossible for them to break. There are times in everyone's life when we need help from our neighbors. There are times when we just can't pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. And poverty and homelessness is one of those circumstances. We need to show more compassion. We need to show more leadership. We need to solve this problem.
Mr. Weinholz.
It is a serious problem, and I believe the solution lies in creating opportunity for people. Once again, we don't have enough high-paying jobs. Governor Herbert likes to tout the number of jobs that we have, but we don't have enough high-paying jobs that pay a living wage. The other thing we have to do is start with an approach of housing first. And one of the things that I was pleased to see in the last legislative session was the funding for homeless people that was proposed jointly by Mayor McAdams and Mayor Biskupski. Because when you have a home as a base, a solid foundation, you can then think about getting up to the next rung of the ladder. But without a home, you are just it becomes hopeless. And so it's about opportunity. We have to create more jobs. We have to do a better job in education, and that will be the start of the cure.
With the candidate's permission, in light of our time, if a rebuttal is necessary, I'll take it. If not, can I go to the next question? Let's do that. There are so many things that our KSL listeners have brought to my attention and want to bring, pardon me, to yours. This one will go to Mr. Weinholz. And few states in the union are more ardently supporting the Second Amendment than the Beehive State. What are your thoughts on gun rights, and would you support any new restrictions?
Mm-hmm. Well, I support the Second Amendment, and I believe in the citizens of Utah's right to bear arms, particularly for hunting and protection. At the same time, though, Utah is seeing a similar spike in gun violence that we're seeing in the rest of the country. And I believe that citizens and law enforcement and legislators can come to a reasonable solution. And I believe that reasonable solution would be background checks. And I know people get all bent out of shape when they hear about any regulation, but even over 80% of NRA members support background checks to keep guns out of the hands of the wrong people that will use them dangerously.
Mr. Cook.
The gun issue is inflammatory, to say the least, and people sometimes feel, I believe, unnecessarily threatened. I think that an issue that's more significant than taking away my guns is, are you going to take away my access to public lands? Are you going to take away the recreational opportunities? Are you going to take away the places where I go to use my guns? And I believe that that is more germane and more appropriate than arguing more this issue of, are you going to take away my guns? If you say you're going to do a background check on me, all of a sudden that means that you're going to know who I am. We just create a lot of fear. We create a lot of unnecessary energy. We raise a lot of money for the NRA. We don't need to be doing any more of that. So we need to be responsible, but I think really we ought to get our priorities right. And I think this public lands issue is much more critical to this state than gun control is.
I got the nod from Mr. Weinholz that we're okay to move forward with another question. And this one is an important one. Utah has much to celebrate. We've talked about some of the accolades that the state has received, but statistics show that we have some deep, disturbing problems, including suicide rates, misuse of prescription drugs, and even sexual assault, all of which are consistently higher than the nation's rates. How should Utah go about addressing these issues? And Mr. Cook, we'll start with you.
Well, I think that the full expansion of Medicaid would be a step in the right direction. When you talk about homelessness, when you talk about suicide, when you talk about these other issues, those are healthcare issues. And underfunding the health system and denying health coverage to the most poor in our state will not help this problem. I think a lot of the problem, too, is awareness of our neighbors. What are the issues? You know, a lot of people in this state live in LDS wards, and they tend to know their ward members. But we can't turn a blind eye to people who don't live in a ward. There's a lot of people who aren't LDS, and even people who are sometimes don't know what's going on with the neighbors next door. So we need to have social programs that provide a safety net. We need social programs that provide services to people who would otherwise go unserved.
Mr. Weinholz.
Another important step to take is the inclusion of mental health coverage in insurance coverage. All too often, mental health coverage is not included. Very often, people on the streets are there because they have mental health issues, and then they end up in jails, which costs us far more to incarcerate them than it would be if we were making investment on the front end, helping people get treatment for drug addiction and treatment for mental health issues as well. We have to make those investments on the front end because it's much more fiscally responsible than having to pay when these folks end up in jails.
All right. Mr. Cook, do you have a rebuttal?
I'm good.
Okay. On that note, let's take a break at this point. We'll come back and hopefully have time for several more questions and our closing statements, our closing items. So, again, our thanks to our KSL listeners. This is our live gubernatorial debate for the Democratic candidates, Von Cook and Mike Weinholz, who are here in our Studio A at KSL. A brief break. We'll be right back. It's 11:45.